On May 9, 1873, inside the Vienna Stock Exchange, a roar of panic drowned out the gavel as 120 banks collapsed in a single afternoon, wiping out the savings of 500,000 families. In 1867, Vienna's liberal government made its first fatal choice: to transform the medieval city into a grand imperial capital. They approved a massive urban expansion plan, the Ringstrasse project, without securing the capital to pay for it. The estimated cost was 500 million gulden, equivalent to the entire annual tax revenue of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. To fund it, they turned to a new breed of financial alchemists, the founding banks. These banks, like the Wiener Bankverein, were given a license to print money, not literally, but by issuing shares and bonds backed by little more than architectural drawings. By 1872, 378 new banks had been chartered in Vienna, many with no more capital than a single office and a brass nameplate. The human stakes were intoxicating. A waiter could become a speculator overnight, buying shares on credit with a 10% down payment, dreaming of doubling his money by Christmas. The consequence was a city built on paper. The second decision was made not in Vienna, but in Berlin. In 1871, after defeating France, the newly unified German Empire demanded a war indemnity of 5 billion francs, a staggering sum, equivalent to 1.4 billion marks. France paid it in just 2 years, flooding Central Europe with gold. The German government, flush with cash, decided to stop minting silver coins and adopt the gold standard. This sent a tsunami of silver into Austria. Suddenly, Austrian banks were awash in cheap money. Instead of tightening credit, the Austrian National Bank kept interest rates at a seductively low 3.5%. This was the trap. Cheap money made every speculative project look profitable. Builders borrowed millions to construct palaces that had no tenants. By March 1873, the volume of bills of exchange, a form of short-term credit, had tripled in 2 years. The third decision was an act of hubris disguised as celebration. In 1872, the Austrian government and Vienna's elite decided to host the 1873 World's Fair, promising it would showcase the empire's prosperity and attract global investment. They poured 19 million gulden into a colossal exhibition hall, the rotund and lavish pavilions. But the fair was a lie. Behind the gilded facades, the banks were already bleeding. To keep the illusion alive, the founding banks began a dangerous game. They bought their own shares to prop up prices and paid dividends out of new investors' money, a classic Ponzi scheme. The key person was a charismatic financier named Adolf Petschek, who ran the Union Bank and secretly controlled a web of shell companies. When a newspaper began publishing skeptical articles in April 1873, Petschek and his allies bribed journalists and threatened editors to kill the stories. On May 8, 1873, the board of the Wiener Bankverein discovered that its director, Karl Weiss, had embezzled 2 million gulden to cover his personal losses in the stock market. The board faced a choice: report the fraud and risk a panic, or cover it up and hope for a miracle. They chose silence. But rumors spread like fire in a dry forest. The next morning, May 9th, a crowd gathered outside the bourse before dawn. When the doors opened, the floor became a battlefield. Brokers screamed sell orders, but there were no buyers. By noon, the panic had spread to the street. A run on the banks began. Within hours, 120 banks suspended payments. A prominent speculator, Baron von Shea, shot himself in his office at the exchange. The final, most catastrophic decision was made in the days after the crash. The Austrian National Bank had the power to act as a lender of last resort. But its president, Alois Moser, was a prisoner of the gold standard orthodoxy. He believed that printing money would destroy the currency's credibility. So, on May 12th, he refused to issue emergency loans. This was the decision that turned a crash into a depression. Without a bailout, the contagion spread to industry. Factories closed. Railways went bankrupt. In the United States, The crash triggered the panic of 1873 in September when J. Cook's bank collapsed. By 1874, 1 in 3 Viennese families had no income. The consequence was a 6-year depression that reshaped politics, fueling anti-Semitism and protectionism. The lesson: when a central bank chooses ideology over action, it sentences millions to poverty. What would you have done? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe to Noir and uncover the stories money tried to hide.